Hello, my friends. You're on the Insecurity Project with Jamin. Today, my guest is Joe Currell. Joe is a careers advisor and reached out to me after being a listener of the podcast for some time and just said how much value he was getting out of it and that his journey was one of overcoming insecurity, and thought that he'd love a chance to share that. He'd love a chance to share the stuff he's learned along the way and be part of the conversation, be part of helping people realize there is a way to overcome this. So, look, Joe, it's a real privilege and a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you for being willing to share your story, and I'm excited to have you here.
Thank you very much for having me, Jamin. Hopefully something I say is of use to someone out there, and I've gotten a lot out of your podcast and also people ringing up and willing to be interviewed and making themselves vulnerable and being honest. So I'll do my best to do that.
Excellent. That's great. Well, I appreciate it. So, as I do with all my guests, let's start at the start, because, the patterning is people imagine their problems are complicated and unique, and they're always looking to compare themselves with other people. So, people often blame their past as a reason why they are where they are. And so I think it's so useful to hear stories of other people's past because, it turns out it doesn't really matter where you start, whether you have your parents do perfectly or whether they do terribly. Everyone has some insecurity to overcome as part of their journey. So I'm always interested by people's backstory and the specific challenges that came with being you and growing up in your house. So tell us a bit about what it was like being a kid in your family and, how your parents went, establishing self-esteem and helping you think about who you were as a person.
So parents have always been separated as far as I can remember. So I had quite a good upbringing. I'm very blessed to have learned a lot of really good lessons from both parents. My dad has always instilled a really strong sense of confidence. I've always felt as though I could try any sport or any hobby or whatever, or pursue a career in whatever I wanted to do. And both of my parents would support me in that. But that being said, certainly, as you said before, we all have insecurities and we all have weaknesses. Those weaknesses are no more evident than being a parent, I think. So my father always has been, as far as I can remember, and still is, bipolar. So he has always struggled with insecurity and recognising and dealing with emotions. So growing up, I guess he was my main example of how to deal with emotions and deal with insecurity. And there was one of the things I love about my dad is he says what he thinks and he's very honest, but it's also a big weakness of his. And there was always a lot of confrontation between him and other people. And I was just, myself and my two older brothers, that's just what we saw. We saw a lot of confrontation. We saw this adult, our father, arguing with people quite often and taking other people's opinions on board. So that led myself, I won't speak on behalf of my brothers, but growing up thinking that's the norm. It's you take other people's opinion on board, you don't take any nonsense off anyone, and you stand up for yourself. And it didn't always work out as a young adult. I started to learn very quickly that it's not a sustainable way to be, to take other people's opinions on board all the time and act off emotions. And so basically,
Yeah, sure. Okay, cool. Very interesting. So tell us a bit about, your journey becoming your own person, leaving home into the workforce, into relationships, and when you kind of realized that there were some limiting beliefs that had an impact on who you were as a person and how you were functioning.
Yeah, so a few years ago, I was sort of looking back at, a few years ago, I'd probably hit rock bottom, 2016, 2017. And I'd often compare myself to who I was several years prior, this confident teenager, and I still do, very sociable and as all teenagers are, well, a lot of them, they think they know everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember just feeling that, started to feel insecurity for the first time, started to creep in, probably in my early 20s. And I hadn't really experienced that before. I grew up in a small country town, and I was never really challenged too much in my way of thinking or whatnot. So, yeah, I'd say probably actually my mid-20s, insecurity really started to creep into my life.
Okay, and how did it play out? How did you tell us about that experience?
So 2016 is when I guess it really played out. I found out my wife was having an affair, and we separated, and we're having our first child, and and that's when things really started to head south in terms of insecurity and depression and anxiety and things like that. So
you took that all pretty personally, then, no doubt.
Yeah, it was the start of the trough, for sure. Towards the end of 2016, I was in my mid-20s, and that's when things really, really plummeted. And I really started to experience, looking back on it now, what I identify as insecurity and at the time, a lot of depression and.
Were you aware of the backstory that was being played in your mind about the meaning you were giving to that experience?
Not at all. No. I was just acting on emotions, and I'd experience an emotion, I'd experience depression, and then I'd just grapple with it, and it'd just be a downward spiral every day, James. And I'd wake up, I'd say for probably the worst of it was probably a good 6 months. I'd wake up, I'd try and I've always been good at looking after myself somewhat, so I've always been good at exercising. But what I'm saying is, for someone that's been good at looking after themselves, depression and insecurity really got a hold of me for quite a while, and I couldn't make sense of it. So, I didn't know what those really bad emotions were and what really high levels of insecurity were. I didn't know how to deal with them. I didn't know that feeling, and I just thought you just need to deal with it and get on board with it. And that's how people's lives, I think, are controlled by insecurity. It's just like this feeling. It's comparing themselves against others, and I've been there and done it. And they think it's a norm, and it's not. Just getting washing machine by insecurity all the time, and it doesn't have to be that way.
No, it doesn't. And I think that's obviously the big part of this project is giving people tools, frameworks, and ideas to navigate that and realize, sure, it's going to happen at some point, but there's a way to process it. And the more I think about it, the more I think that insecurity is probably a wonderful opportunity. Like it's going to happen. It's a natural part of becoming an adult, because we need to know that we matter. Typically, we find all kinds of things outside of us to prove that we matter. But when they're taken from us, then we're like, hang on a minute, but who am I without that? And what does that mean about me? And it opens up this can of worms. And so it's going to happen at some point. To know how to deal with that is the essential part of this process. So so tell us what happened next, and what was involved in you doing the work around navigating that and processing that emotion and the stuff that was going on in your head and heart as a result of that affair.
Well, I was starting afresh, really. In a way, I had a blank canvas. My wife and I ended up separating for a good year, best part of a year, and we're back together now, and things are great. But so I was sort of handed that card, and for want of a better phrase, handed that card, and a lot of my identity was, a married young man and, starting a young family. And then all of a sudden, I was looking forward to starting a young family and being a young dad and all this sort of stuff. And then overnight it's gone. So I had this blank canvas of trying to rebuild myself, and I had so many other people's opinions telling me what to do, do what makes you happy, and no, you need to knuckle down and be responsible and rebuild the relationship, and no, you should lead the relationship, and all this sort of stuff. And what was scary about all of that is I didn't have the confidence or belief in myself to really make my own decisions. And I did, but it took a long time. So yeah, just starting out on your own, and yeah, that's when I think when you hit rock bottom, you really start to you have to rely on your own skills and your own knowledge. And for most people, that's scary. It's a scary thing.
Yeah. So, what was the gift in that experience for you?
I now have a reference point. I think so. I now have a reference point of what life can look like. What depression can be, how far insecurity can take you in life, like down. I mean, and I now see the value of reading books that better yourself, and listening to podcasts, and reaching out and networking with people, and seeing yourself as not just this individual who acts on his emotions and is vulnerable, but we're all vulnerable. But one of the best benefits is, as I said, that reference point and being able to make my own decisions. Like I said, I've hit rock bottom. It was the worst time in my life, by far, and yeah, I'm a lot stronger. I know I've gotten through it. I'm a lot more confident in my own ability and my own emotional agility and all that sort of thing. So
yeah, great. So you mentioned books. What books did you find useful in the process?
Jordan Peterson, 12 Rules for Life.
Amazing
for
book.
Sure.
What stuck out to you the most in that book?
Tough question. Chapter 1, stand up straight with your shoulders back. So Jordan, for those that aren't familiar, that chapter is all about taking responsibility for your own life, and realizing that you actually can take responsibility, and what that actually means. It's like you can make choices and live out those choices, and start small, and fix little things in your life. Fix little things you do every day, your routine and exercise and diet and things you say, and you start to look after yourself, and you start to develop all these little skills and fix all little problems in front of you that you can, and then you can start to, as the chapter says, stand up straight with your shoulders back, and start to voluntarily take on challenges, and the insecurities that you have with yourself. It's take them on. Often I think anxiety and insecurity, it's we need to give our insecurities a voice. We need to understand our insecurities, and really analyse the stuff. Well, why are we insecure at at a dinner party, or when someone says they don't like the way we dress? It's not just getting on board with those emotions and spiraling out of control. It's really standing up straight with your shoulders back, and giving that insecurity a voice. It's like, well, maybe you need to develop a part of your personality, or maybe you're not skilled in social situations, or I love it. It's fantastic. It's being proactive, and then it's also when you start to fix things yourself, you start to realise that you can fix things, and that's how you become stronger, I think. So yeah.
100%. Have you heard me bang on about Nathaniel Branden's The Psychology of Self-Esteem at all?
Yes.
Well, that's the process. When you face up, start small, you teach yourself you've got what it takes. So you're right, it just becomes a success reference point. Nice. Any other books or resources that were useful to you in helping you do that personal development work?
Yeah, a lot of podcasts. Obviously, this podcast has been fantastic. I love the 10-minute Tuesdays, and just really focusing on, might be understanding self-sabotage, for example. I think that's one of the best podcasts I've ever listened to. Just being able to. I'm a massive fan of podcasts, hence I'm on this one speaking to you. But when someone's down in the dumps, and people come in and try and help them, and I like you make reference to ask someone who doesn't care about you. So we have all these people around us who care about us, and in my example, it's like you should rebuild your relationship now,
Yeah.
and you should walk away, and you should do what makes you happy. You should build
Yeah.
your self-esteem. I can't repeat some of the things that some of my friends said I should do, travel around the world and just whatever. But yeah, people care about us. But one of the awesome things about we can pick up our phone and listen to podcasts and watch. There's a lot of stuff out there, so
Yeah.
exercise your own judgment. But there's so much to learn, and that's one thing I'd say to people that are really struggling with insecurity and depression, or they're in a part of their life that sucks and they want to get out of, is just give it a bit of time and seek out. There's so much stuff out there that's really, really cool, and there are a lot of people who've gone through a lot of things that you can just learn so much from. So in some ways, acknowledge that people in your direct life are trying to help you, but at the same time, yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff you can learn.
Yeah. You got to be ready though, which is the interesting thing, because obviously there's no lack of resources or conversations to be had. So what made you ready, do you think, to reach out and, take yourself by the scruff of the neck or go into a room full of mirrors and have a good hard look at yourself, like Ryan HG would say? Like what created readiness for you, do you think?
Getting rid of the concept of, not getting on board with the concept of self-esteem. I spent probably a good 18 months, listening to friends and listening to myself. It's like, do what makes you happy, and it just doesn't lead anywhere. I was just sort of like chasing my tail, and I'm not a big fan of the whole concept of self-esteem and just doing what makes you happy. I had a lot of, did a lot of stupid stuff throughout that time, and we think it's good for us, and it was kind of a case of just enough's enough. I was listening on the radio one time, and it was when I first heard Jordan Peterson. It would have been 2018 when I first heard Jordan Peterson was being interviewed on ABC Radio, and he was just talking about the concept of step up and take some responsibility. And everyone knows that, but that's what I needed to hear. So it was a bit of a smack in the face, and step up and take responsibility in your life. And it's back to that chapter 1 of his book, 12 Rules for Life, stand up straight with your shoulders back. And the cool thing about that is you can choose what area of your life you take responsibility in. I had a wife and a baby. It's like, what am I doing being selfish and whinging and complaining and being self-destructive and things like that? It's like I've got so much potential in front of me here that I can step up and take responsibility for, and build my own skills and justify my existence.
Well, blame and excuse feel so fun and give so much energy, but at some point you kind of realize they don't get you anywhere. They don't give you any progress. They leave you powerless. So to realize, okay, responsibility is much harder, but all change comes through responsibility. So you're right. Okay, let's go. It's an amazing realization and a very powerful one.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so cool talking to you because, as a generalization, men are not great about talking about their feelings or processing their feelings in a really healthy way. You gave the example of your dad, modeling maybe an unhealthy way of processing emotion that you had to decide wasn't going to be the way you move forward. So what would you say to men in general that would... what would you say to men who have got a bunch of stuff going on for them at the moment and they're not talking to anyone about
it? Great question. It's, I heard a really cool concept of, we're here because of my mum and dad made me, and then my grandparents made them, and so on and so forth, all the way down the family tree. So we consist of DNA from several generations, and there's all these skills. And basically what it means is, so there's a concept of you need to rescue your father from the belly of the whale. I think it's Pinocchio, the story of Pinocchio I heard once. That basically means that we consist of so much potential. We consist of all these skills. We consist of so much potential for resilience, strength and creativity and kindness and all these traits that are within inside of us. And a lot of the time that's sort of covered up by in men, I mean, in, just with this idea that this image that we have of ourselves and what we think we're good at and what we think we should do. It's like, oh, I'm not going to go to counselling because I have this preconceived idea about counselling, or I'm not good at X, Y, or Z because I've never done it before. And, open your eyes. It's like we consist of so much genetic potential, and it's something you can surrender to and just sort of fall back on and see what you're good at. So if you're a man and you're struggling with depression or anxiety, it's we have so much genetic potential, and fall back on that. So if it's counselling, you need to see a psychologist or whatever it is. You might have so many skills and traits. You might have the potential to be one of the best fathers out there. You have so much potential to be a great father. You have so much potential to be fantastic at work, and you have so much potential to be a great friend. And step up and really seek out ways you can reveal yourself to yourself. And it's so cool because you start to learn that you can grow and you can develop. And I think that's how I clawed out of sort of the hole I was in. So
it's so cool because it's almost like we're afraid of weakness, but what about the strength you're ignoring? You're afraid if you go looking, you'll find what you're not good at. But what if you go looking and find what you are good at instead, and discover a whole mountain of, as you said, potential, genetic potential, that you get to stand on the shoulders of your father and your father's father and his father, and the collective consciousness of the planet has been increasing every generation. So we have so much to rely on and surrender to. And
and it's not just a case. And I'd like to add to what I said. It's not just a case that we have all this potential and just go out and find it. And you do that through challenges. You do it. You take on challenges and you accept responsibility and you grow from that. But it's for people listening out there, it's like, well, that all sounds good, but how do you get there? And I think for me, one of the biggest barriers is doubting ourselves and really getting on board with that voice in our head. The insecurity. It's if someone chips you about something or doesn't agree with you or doesn't like you or whatever it is, it's like we all experience that voice in our head of saying you're not good enough. And don't go, if you take on this responsibility in your family or at work, it's like, you'll probably fail, and we start to second guess ourselves. So it's all well and good to say take on responsibility and seek out challenges, but first it's like we really need to focus on no more. It's like no more living life, governed by that level of insecurity and that little voice in our head that's always second guessing, always doubting us. It's, that's one of the best things I deal with every day. I'm not on this podcast saying I've overcome insecurity and depression and things like that. We all have our moments, but I'll tell you what, it's so much better than acting on your emotions and being overwhelmed by your own feelings. And
it's beautiful. And what you're describing is very much practice 3, which is to stack the pain. Involves really accurate cost assessment. And when you really sum it up and just go, hang on a minute, enough is enough. You create this threshold moment in your life where you're like, yeah, great. There's some cost involved in change, but it's nothing like the cost of staying here any longer. So whatever's involved, giddy up, let's go. And in those moments, those threshold moments, that is where deep change takes place. I really appreciate you sharing your personal example of that. Okay, so are there any final thoughts summing up? You've shared a lot. We've covered some cool ideas. Anything else you think's missing from the conversation to sum it up?
Oh, not as yet. I could bang on about this sort of stuff for quite a while, so we'll have to stop it somewhere.
Great. I appreciate that. We started this conversation by talking about not adding to the noise. So let's not add to any more noise. Short and sweet. I really appreciate your time and your sharing and your vulnerability to share a very personal story. And I think that is a real gift that you've given the world by going, hey, listen, this is what I went through, and here's where I am today. So you're going to be okay. Step up, take responsibility, head up, shoulders back, and get on with the work of reviewing who you are and finding out what's inside you. So, Joe, thank you for your time and appreciate you sharing.
Thanks very much for having me, Jamin.